All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Atlan Masterclass. I am super excited about today's topic, talking about self-service analytics, and we're lucky enough to be joined by the team from Chargebee. This topic is something I'm especially fond of. I've talked about self-service analytics now, even in my past life before Atlan for the past 5 or 6 years. And it's something that when we saw what Chargebee was doing, we just knew we had to share what they were able to achieve. So with that being said, we'll get into a quick agenda for the day. We're going to let Lloyd and Lavanya from Chargebee introduce themselves and their team, talk about what they were going through and what their challenges were as a data and analytics group within their organization, and then ultimately what put them down this path to self-service and how they were able to achieve success. Part 4, I think, is especially important because nothing happens in isolation. We have to change overall culture and behavior. So really excited to hear what they were doing to really change the entire mindset about self-service analytics. And ultimately, what were those key takeaways and the impact that it's had in the organization. But this is an Atlan Masterclass. And so before I hand it over to Lloyd and Lavanya, we have to do some type of interactive poll. Today, we're talking about self-service, so I want to hear from you. What even comes to mind when you hear self-service? I feel like it means something different to so many different personas, and the answers will pop up live. We'll get a great word cloud going, and I think it's just a great way to kick off the session. Maybe self-service is paradise to you. Maybe it's the Wild West right now in the organization. I feel like I've heard everything whenever it comes to self-service, so really excited. A lot of autonomy, efficiency, goals. Yeah. I think autonomy is something that's critical, I think, in the modern data stack. Awesome. Yeah, getting a lot of answers coming in. Automation and autonomy. Yeah, independence, allowing people to, for lack of a better term, serve themselves. Cool. Yeah, enablement. Wow, that's taken a drastic lead. We'll hear a lot about enablement today. So I think that's a perfect transition for me to hand it over to the people you're here to hear from, which is Lloyd and Lavanya from Chargebee. Lloyd, Lavanya, thank you for joining us. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Austin. Hi, everyone. I'm Lavanya. Lloyd and I are super happy to be here. This is an exciting thing for us, and happy to share our journey building self-service data culture at Chargebee. For those of you who are not familiar with Chargebee, we are the recurring revenue management platform for global scale. We power the entire recurring revenue lifecycle, from subscription billing to invoicing to cash, revenue recognition, receivables, retention, and a lot more. We integrate seamlessly with multiple other systems that power other aspects of your business. And with about 30 plus gateways, supported by 100 plus currencies, 4,500 plus customer growth stories. Our mission is to empower businesses of all sizes to maximize their growth potential. So do check us out. Coming back to data, I think where we started out, a couple of years ago, a lot of spreadsheets, some of them converted into dashboards, endless requests for raw data. We've come a long way, and Atlan is integral to this data experience that we've created. So I'm super happy once again to be here. And I used to lead the business intelligence and data analytics at Chargebee and work very closely with Lloyd and his team. And so this is something that we took from the seed right through to reality. And I've moved on now to a slightly more expanded role looking at culture and systems. But this story is close to my heart. So over to Lloyd. Lloyd, please introduce yourself. Let's get this started.
Thanks, Lavanya. Hello, everybody. I am Lloyd, and I lead the business intelligence team here at Chargebee. I used to report to Lavanya, and now I report to Tim, who leads the FP&A and data at Chargebee. So the business intelligence team and data analytics team now is part of FP&A at Chargebee. And in our team, we have a couple of rockstar BA analysts, Mahesh and Ashik. And we also work very closely with Raj Kumar, who leads the data engineering team. And as a group, we take care of all internal reporting and data needs across the organization. And we all of us work together to drive the data culture at Chargebee. So this is one of my favorite quotes. I'll leave it on the screen for you, you to read and absorb the ground reality of this, as all data teams experience it at least once in their career. You could probably screenshot it. Yeah. So
I can picture it being a poster on the wall in the virtual offices. Is what.
So moving on, let's talk about how we started and what was our initial state of data analytics at Chargebee. I think it was in early 2021 when we started growing rapidly as an organization. And as we did that, the data needs also started growing at a rapid pace. The data engineering team started receiving a huge number of data requests from people across the organization. And this team was also handling requests from the customers as well. And this was a huge challenge, as internal data requests were pushed to the back of the queue, as customers were always a priority. This meant that we were not meeting SLAs, and there was unhappiness within among our stakeholders and lots of escalation, which led to unhappiness within the team as well. So it was a challenge and it was also a challenge for us to hire for these roles, as they, people did not want to service just data requests in all day long, as they did not find it as interesting as other roles in data engineering. And in order to avoid burnout, we tried to reduce the burden on the data engineering team by creating dashboards or creating automations to handle repetitive requests. But in spite of that, what people wanted was, they wanted to look at the underlying data at a very granular level, and they always wanted options to export to Excel, which again is another major pain that all of us who have been in the BA industry or in the data industry can relate to. So when the stakeholders wanted underlying data from the dashboards, the onus was once again back on the data engineering teams to deliver it. So we were falling into this trap of data as a service, where we were always on a reactive mode rather than be on a proactive mode. We were just reacting to data requests, and a huge chunk of our time went into servicing all these data requests and getting requirements and building products, instead of proactively going about creating data products that people could consume. So I think we started looking at lots of tools in the industry. We started looking at customer data platform, CDP tools like Segment, and we explored the capabilities of the data warehouse that we were using. And that's when we started evaluating Atlan as well. And we were happy with the features that Atlan had to offer us. So while self-service was not just the only problem it was solving, it also helped us set up the data catalog and a metric glossary as well. And once the decision was made to purchase Atlan, we started a preparation on onboarding data sets onto Atlan. So as a first step, we analyzed tickets data from 2 previous quarters to understand who are our most frequent requesters, or what type of data requests are coming into the system. And our initial sets of users were people from the business intelligence team, the analytics team, and the data engineering team. So we wanted to get familiar with Atlan and what features it had. And we got our hands dirty by cataloging a lot of data sets and playing around on Atlan. And once we were comfortable, we onboarded a set of users. That is, we selected users from ops teams from across the organization, and we call them as Atlan champions. So it's a feel-good word, and everybody likes being called champions. So we thought we should stick to that. And these champions were enabled on Atlan. We gave them walkthroughs. We gave them data context on how to find data, how to use the tool. And they were responsible for helping their teams solve the data requests. And once this gained momentum, we identified more people across the organization who were tech savvy and SQL savvy, people who frequently worked with data, and people who had good hands-on experience on SQL. So we onboarded them and brought them onto Atlan. So we then prepared a questionnaire, and we conducted user interviews with all these stakeholders to understand how they use data, what type of data they need, what are the data needs of their team. And based on this, we tailored a plan to prioritize the onboarding of data sets to Atlan so that it can be consumed immediately. Yeah, so
Awesome. Yeah, I think one of the most common questions in self-service is like, where do we even start, right? Different teams are going to be at different levels of maturity. And when you were first talking to me about what you were able to do at Chargebee, the thing that stuck out a lot was the amount of work that you put in to prepare to roll out a self-service strategy, right? The whole ticket analysis and, just identifying which champions were ready and which champions were willing to buy into this new philosophy. So I think that's an incredible, where do we start type of message. You'll see a poll on your screen. Just curious to hear from the group, what would you say from the audience, like, is your biggest barrier to self-service right now? Is it something like data timeliness, meaning, you're hearing from stakeholders that by the time we get them something, it's stale for the decision that they need to make? Or is it the relevance, just purely, I can't even find the data that I need. I'm not sure where to look. Is it the data quality, the data accuracy piece? Is it data consistency? Meaning, when I log into my dashboard, the classic, something doesn't look right, or my dashboard's broken. Or is it just overall, our data maturity, our data knowledge, our data literacy in the organization is probably something that is challenging right now. So data knowledge, data literacy is definitely dominating right now. 58% of respondents are saying that it's just the overall data literacy of the organization, which I think lends itself very well to some of the survey work that you were doing to try to figure out which ones are ready and which ones actually are, querying data currently, which ones have certain types of data requests. So really interesting results, but maybe not that surprising. And then data relevance in second, which is just where is the data? Where, how do I even know how to get to it? And Lloyd, I think you're going to share some details here in a few minutes on, how you were able to expose data, record it, things like that. So thanks, everyone. We'll close that poll, and Lloyd, I'll kick it back to you.
Thank you. So this is an architecture of how we use Atlan to solve, how we brought in Atlan into our existing data stack. So at Chargebee, we do our analysis using data from a large number of data sources. I think off the top of my head, the number has to be at least 20, which will include CRM or human resources, tools, and so on. So this data is transformed and loaded into our warehouse by the data engineering team. And our visualization and analytics teams, they make use of this data to prepare the reports and the analytical reports as well. So we have so much data lying in the data warehouse, but if you wanted to open out access to users, I don't think they would be able to find out what data resides in which table, and they wouldn't be able to do this on their own. And this was where Atlan was a huge help to us. We used the data cataloging features to describe the tables and columns. So we wrote brief descriptions of each and every table that we brought onto Atlan, and a single line description for all the columns that are there in each of the tables. We tagged owners against the tables, and we also use it to house our metric definitions as well. And as you can see, Tableau is also connected with Atlan. People were able to search for dashboards on Atlan and land on Tableau via Atlan. So for an example, as a user, if I were to search for a particular metric, ARR, so it'll the Atlan will show me how the metric is defined and calculated. It will show me a sample calculation for the metric, and also it will show me the tables which are used to calculate the metric, and the saved queries as well for calculating it, and also the dashboards which display the metric ARR. So it's just a one-stop shop for anyone who wants to explore data on their own.
I think one thing I'd like to add there is, where do I land, where do I go is one of those standard questions people would ask you, right? And you give them three different things. You say, hey, go to this for Tableau, and go there for something else, and here's your spreadsheet for the request that you asked. That was always complicated. And now we had this answer where, we just point them to Atlan, they just go there, search for what they want. And by linking it to Tableau and these other sources, people could just key in, say, a metric, right, ARR, and then see not just the metric definition and calculation, but also where else is it being used? Where do I need to look it up? What are these various contexts that I need for this particular metric? And that organically actually helped us build out a lot of the literacy around the metrics that we have in our business. And that's been super helpful as well. Like Lloyd mentioned, because we were all rapidly reactive and responding to requests, sharing context and documentation on metrics, people would have their own definitions, right? Or their own interpretations of a particular metric. So just having a single source where the metric is cleanly defined, you have the calculation logic, people can understand how this works, how is it calculated. Not just that, but also how mature is that metric, how evolved, and how do people know that, right? The whole data relevance and the data consistency, the staleness or otherwise of the data. Just having all of that information on Atlan. And then who do I talk to if I have problem with this particular metric? Everything just gets answered. And who do I give feedback to? You can still do that on Atlan. And I think that was really exciting. The moment we saw that, we went there for data cataloging and discovery, and then realized, we're getting a whole bunch of these other things. So it's actually a lot of our enablement also happens through the context that we've built out on Atlan. And Lloyd, perhaps if you want to talk a little bit about, some of the other enablement pieces that we've done.
So apart from cataloging the tables that are present in the warehouse, it was also useful in cataloging the dashboards as well, like I mentioned earlier. So it was not just the data discovery tool, it acted as a dashboard discovery tool as well, because a lot of users did not know if a particular dashboard was, is even present. Our developers spent huge amounts of time and effort creating so much dashboards, but it's disappointing to see a lot of these dashboards go unused. But after Atlan came into the picture, every single search resulted in at least one dashboard that could be explored for a particular metric. So it solved a lot of problems for us.
Yeah, I think you touched on a good point, which I've come across in a lot of conversations about self-service, which is with how easy it is to build something. And I know you're using Tableau, for example. I mean, such an easy tool to build that in a data hungry organization, you're going to have so many dashboards that are just able to be constructed by business users and analysts that, rarely do we ever get the opportunity to just start from scratch. And so I think having the ability to see where the data ends up in a dashboard, and along with, for net new requests, seeing what kind of tables are available to build or edit or change those dashboards is something that can be really powerful. Just having that kind of bird's eye view of the overall ecosystem. I used to hear all the time, like, our self-service environment is, a Wild West, or it's chaos right now. And so I like to think there's some element of managing that chaos whenever you're able to see kind of the lineage aspect, as well as just objectively cataloging the assets themselves. So.
As a growing startup, one of the challenges which we had was not having proper documentation for all the tables that were available in our warehouse. I mean, one can understand that we just kept creating creating tables without proper documentation, and because the number of tables were less, and then it's just started piling up. And we were at one point we had a random effort to pull in names of different tables and to write one-line descriptions for the same, but this effort did not scale, and the cataloging feature helped us complete long pending documentation and metadata tagging of different tables in the data warehouse as well. So this metadata tagging also allowed users to see who are the owners of the data and the maturity levels of the data that is present in the tables. And if they had any issues with the data, they were able to reach out directly to the owners to get those issues sorted. And this is where we are now, where people can log into Atlan and see who are the owners. As you can see, if I search for a particular table called monthly TPV, it will show me when it was verified, or when how many columns are there, what are the descriptions for the columns, what terms or glossary terms have been tagged against this table, and if there are any saved queries against the table, that will also show up here. So these are some of the features that we use on Atlan. And one of the advantages that we found, and how we make use of Atlan, is that when people reach out to us for data requests, and if the table is already present on Atlan, we just respond to them saying, hey, check out the following saved query on Atlan, and give them the link to the saved query, which This is the mode of this is how we started working after we started using Atlan.
Lloyd, can I get you here for a little bit of a backstory?
Yeah.
Just to point you out to that Ask Databee Slack channel that you can see there. So, one step back now, you point people to Atlan to discover data, right? Like, but how do they reach out to us? So we had to solve that first. And, much before we got to Atlan, when we were having a host of data requests coming at us from, all sources, people pinging individuals, sending it on our common email and so on. We created this Slack channel called Ask Databee, and then we had, nominated ourselves to provide support, responses, redirect them to Atlan, redirect them to the dashboards as relevant, and proactively engaging with our customers on the Slack channel was also an important driver in changing the behavior to say, okay, if you go ask them, they're going to give us an Atlan link. What's this Atlan? How do I get on there? So that's a tiny bit that probably will be a little relevant when we talk about behaviors.
And just bonus points for the Ask Databee name, I have to say.
It was brainstormed.
Love it.
Thanks, Lavanya. So data requests are plenty in number, and this is how we were solving data requests. We depended a lot on Google Sheets and spreadsheets to share it within the companies. And now users write their own queries and save them and share the links with their team members, or they make use of already existing saved queries and they change the parameters to fetch the data that they want, and then save the changes and share that link with their team members to share data. So as we discussed earlier about the growing number of requests that the data engineering team was receiving, it was becoming quite a challenge to prioritize these requests. We then brought in a Scrum Master to help in streamlining the process of receiving requests. And the first step we did was we defined the priorities for the requests. As you can see, critical customer requests were received the highest priorities, and then incidents involving the customer received the next higher priority. And as always, internal data requests were earmarked for the lowest priority. But one of the things that the Scrum Master was able to do was he was able to identify data requests which could be solved using tables already existing on Atlan. And he would route these tickets to our team, and our team in turn would respond to these requesters saying that this data request can be resolved using Atlan, and we will also provide them with the tables and tables which can be used to fetch the data. And in a lot of cases, we also help them in writing the query to fetch the data as well. And as this was going on, as time progressed, we realized that we were spending a lot of time on writing these queries, and this was not going to be a scalable approach. So we thought we should do something about it, and we sent out a survey across the organization asking to understand if users were interested in signing up for SQL training courses, and it was well received. So we compiled a list of YouTube videos and share it across these users so that they can watch and learn and practice SQL at their own pace. And we also created learning paths on other learning management tools like Udemy. And users enroll for these courses for SQL and Tableau, and so that they will be able to onboard quickly onto Atlan. So I'll let Lavanya talk about some of the workshops that we had with Atlan in establishing a data culture.
Thanks, Lloyd. Once we got onto Atlan, our team spent some time playing around with the features. We onboarded our early users, and at some point, first couple of months, we went on a team offsite, and we wanted to test out how far we had moved from the whole data as a service mindset to actually building data products. So we spent about close to a day, half a day to a day, just co-creating, brainstorming and saying, okay, how do we work really? What is it that we are doing? What are we seeing in the last couple of months? And just to test out our mindset. And then we arrived at some of these where we said, yes, we want to be building reusable, scalable products. We want to iterate and improve. We want to be trusted by our customers. We want to add value to them. We want to be able to have our customers self-service. We want to enable better data discovery. Everything that we had set out as our goals organically evolved as we did the brainstorming exercise and came through. which was very heartening. And thanks to Nandini from Atlan, who facilitated this session so that all of us could participate. And she kept asking us really hard questions, but it was super helpful. And so we arrived at this, and this really helped us align internally as a team and be super convinced that, yes, we're building data products. And this conviction carried through when we started engaging with our internal customers. How are we looking at our customer data? People were asking for them in slices. Give me X information about the customer and so on. Now, how do we take them from there and build something reusable, easily accessible, well-documented, and a product that can serve multiple other people that we can enable by how we build it? And I think this exercise on how we build what we build was super helpful for us. So if you're considering it, I would definitely recommend spending some time with your own team and getting clear about how you build. That was very helpful for us to scale once we brought on Atlan.
Awesome. Yeah, we have one last poll. We had some good examples of like data as a service workshops. We were finding like your team's values and spending some time actually thinking about how your team operates and where you'd like to be. Just curious to hear from the group, what are some of the ways that you've tried maybe changing behaviors, whether it was workshops or trainings or, doing an analysis of your current ecosystem. I think anything is helpful. Yeah, training is huge. I think one of the biggest things that you can kind of take away from this is there's a lot of tools out there that can help with self-service and help create that ecosystem, but there's always going to be that data literacy, that upskilling, that just overall educating your group. Yeah. Office hours, that's a big one. Training wiki and videos, love that. Lloyd, you mentioned YouTube. I think YouTube and Stack Overflow is every developer's best friend these days. Spend a lot of time on there. Power users, training, creating templates. That's a really cool example. I'd like to dive into that one of these days. I always used to say, don't ever let someone start from a blank canvas, right? Give them something. And I think that's kind of what the Chargebee team is doing with saved queries and just allowing users to connect the queries to your actual terms and your actual KPIs. So very cool. Yeah, I figured this would be a lot more unique answers. So this is awesome. I'll hand it back to the Chargebee team.
Thank you, Austin. Yeah, to talk about the impact of it, the adoption of Atlan was great, and it hugely reduced the number of tickets that were being addressed by the data engineering team because of the self-serve capabilities of Atlan. And the amount of time it's saved for stakeholders was also huge. A data request usually takes anywhere between 24 hours to 48 hours to be resolved. But with access to data via Atlan, people were able to reduce the time by 90%. And the data engineering team also got more time to focus on work that did not involve responding to data requests. And one of the main points that I want to talk about was after bringing in Atlan, we stopped receiving escalation requests on late delivery of data, because data was readily available to people, and there were more people who were able to help us stakeholders get data directly from Atlan. And like the screenshot which we showed earlier, here's the Atlan link is now the standard way of responding to data requests that we receive. So these are some of the lines that some of the stakeholders have actually told us. All the data I need is there in a saved query. Or thank you for bringing in Atlan. I am more data driven. So people have become more tech savvy and SQL savvy nowadays, and they know how to make use of the saved queries feature. But they just need to change a few parameters, like filter out separate geographies or filter out different segments of customers to get the data that they need for their own analysis. So these are the key takeaways. And one of the things that helped us greatly was the fact that we were able to measure what we wanted to improve and what problems we wanted to solve using Atlan. We knew exactly where we stood and what we wanted to achieve using Atlan. And it was also helpful that we identify the right people within the organization to take Atlan forward, because without the right set of users, I don't think we'll be here to talk about a success story. And one thing that we need to understand is that from being people who used to get data from teams via Slack messages and email requests to becoming self-serving, it is important to understand that it is a process that takes modification of their behavior, and it also takes time and trust. And it is the responsibility of we the data teams to understand the challenges that may arise and help them in solving these challenges, so that people get trust in the system and they start working on their own to get the data themselves. Anything to add here, Lavanya?
This is good, Lloyd. I think it's a process. And when we started, I think we started by studying where we were. Okay, we're being reactive. We have all of these requests. Let's understand them better. And then picking out the champions and giving them their top recurring requests as the first data sets, giving them the queries that would enable them, and then building on from there. I think the starting point also helped for us. But a huge shout out to people at Chargebee. Most of them have an open mindset. So I suppose something new people were willing to try. So that was something we had, going for us.
And also not to forget the support that we received from Atlan at all times. Any query, and they were just a Slack ping away, waiting to help.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it. And obviously we really enjoy working with the Chargebee team. You all are doing some amazing things, and it's been awesome to kind of see the progress that's happening. Self-service is definitely something I think everyone is working towards. So it's great to hear some examples of a team making it happen. Yeah, this is great. I think we have plenty of time for some questions. We could probably do another 10, 15 minutes of questions. I think a recurring question that I've seen in the chat, just monitoring it as we were all talking, was kind of how did you start? You mentioned prioritization in terms of we have these champions, and then Lavanya, you just touched on it was their data request that you sort of started with. What was the process like getting that ball rolling? How did you actually enrich the assets? Were you asking them to give definitions, or a lot of questions about metadata enrichment? And then I can kind of maybe get that into a data product question. But
I think we started building out the metadata bit much earlier, because we were servicing them and we had built out all these dashboards. So some part of that work had already been done, and it was reasonably mature when we got started.
Makes sense. What would a data product look like today, right? You have table descriptions and you have glossaries now, but I know, in the screenshot, there was a lot of owners and certifications and classifications. What does the process look like to create those? And how do you determine and communicate like what they mean to the end users? Like, what does a certified data set look like, or a good data product?
A lot of the data assets that we onboarded onto Atlan were ones that we used to create dashboards for our internal reporting. So these were some of the tables that we prioritized and brought onto Atlan first. And since these tables were already mature enough and verified, we have separate QAs verifying the data pipelines that are being built into the warehouse. And also we do proper validation on the dashboards being built. We were confident with the data sets that were that are being brought into Atlan. So that's how we mark the maturity levels of the data assets. And also the owners are assigned based on the data sources. For example, if a particular table is from a CRM and is being brought into Atlan, people from the revenue team or sales team who are primary users of the CRM are being tagged as the owners. And that's how we typically go about doing the chunk of the metadata work.
Awesome. Yeah, it's super helpful. Probably piggybacking off of that, right? Was there any kind of exercise that you had to like enrich the assets? Was it just, let's sit the team down and one day we're going to go through this? Or, how do you on an ongoing basis get engineers and analysts to maintain the documentation?
Okay. So we had one person working 50% on Atlan. So his primary job, in fact, the goal for a particular quarter was onboard so many data sets and to catalog them. He would set up meetings with the different data owners, with the data engineering teams, to understand what each of those columns or each of those tables stood for. And it was his job to understand what the purpose of the table and to document all of that on Atlan. So we had one person doing this dedicatedly.
Awesome, makes sense. I think we're getting so many questions about the metadata side of things. I guess when you're building these things out, one of the concerns is, how do you avoid multiple versions of the truth, right? You have your metrics. How do you, I guess, keep that as your source of truth? And when there are changes or suggested changes, what does that look like? Do you have different users that can edit versus suggest versus view? What does that maybe governance model look like for you?
I think there are two parts to that question. Lloyd, maybe you can speak to the governance model, but I think a little bit of the buy-in and the single source of truth on, the metric, maybe I'll take that.
People apart from the data engineering and business intelligence teams do not have access to edit any of the metadata that's present on Atlan or for any other tool as well. So they will be able to suggest changes, and it's up to our admin team to verify these requests and approve them. And as a single source of truth, be it the calculation of metrics or the presentation of metrics on dashboards, the business intelligence team owns and manages the definition of all these metrics and publishing of all the dashboards to the production environment. So we have a control on what is being published to the production environment. Even though people from other teams can have access to create dashboards, we publish it to production only after our team does a QA of the dashboards and QA of the metrics and the logic behind the calculation of it. Only when we are satisfied, it is moved to production. So that is how we do the handle governance on metrics and ensure that not different versions of the same metrics exist in the system.
And about the metric definition themselves, right? And making sure there's a single version of truth or definition for that metric. I think that we needed exec sponsor for. We had to go and set expectation, put our hand up and say, we're the ones closest to the data. We will talk to the ops teams, but we are going to say, this is the final calculation. This is the final definition that you can trust. So if there are two people who are having different versions, come to us and what we say goes. And we had to navigate that conversation, make sure we had the exec buy-in, which then percolated to the other ops teams. It did require a lot of engagement, multiple documentation on all of our key metrics, getting people to commit on what we've put in the document. It did take some effort, but once we had that in place and put our hand up for the ownership, I think beyond that point, it was easy to carry it forward and make changes.
Gotcha. Just going off that, there was a sort of a follow-up piece to the cultural and the senior leadership buy-in. Have you run into a scenario yet where someone leaves a team or switches teams and then you have a new person started from scratch? Like, what does the onboarding look like now for a new user, either through Atlan or just overall in data and analytics?
Are you asking from an admin perspective or a steward perspective or a user perspective, Austin?
I have to say all three. I think the question seemed to be asking, right, when owners change, right? Maybe
Right.
you go to a different team. What is the process now to get that new owner up to speed with the data ecosystem? They're already a domain expert probably, but how do we get them up to speed with the data ecosystem?
Right now, I don't think we've run into that issue so far, but the plan which we have in place is to onboard the users and explain to them the importance of having this data ownership. Because, for example, if a data owner for a CRM table or a CRM data asset is moving on to a different team and a new person is taking charge of ownership, he or she needs to be able to take complete ownership of it and be able to answer questions, because most of the users of that particular data set are going to be people from their team, from the sales team or a sales ops team. are the ones who are going to be using a lot of consume data from these tables. So it is the onus is on them to answer and help us in maintaining the sanity of the data assets that are there.
I think one comment on our structure. Typically, the owners of these data sets are from the ops teams, and they're very close to the type of metric and data that their teams are interested in. So anyone new who comes into an ops team, because the previous ops person has gone through this onboarding and data is very critical to the way they function, it usually is covered as part of the new ops person onboarding. And where we would typically come in is when they come on to Atlan, how do they use Atlan? How are things set up and what they need to take from there and any business context that they might need. But usually this is taken care of by the functional operations teams.
Okay, so the data culture is really baked into like the ops and the business side already.
Yes.
Yeah, the operations team, they work hand in hand on a daily basis with the data teams here at Chargebee.
Awesome. I like this question. This one's interesting because it touches on like the centralized versus decentralized team structure that, I think everyone's always in that balance between one or the other. Like how much of a domain expert does the data team have to be, right? So, do you have to divide and conquer, or just purely focus on the technical aspects and let the domain let the data owners be the subject matter experts of the data? Or, do you start to find that certain parts of the data team are specializing in like product data versus customer data versus, what does that look like in the Chargebee team?
Yes.
So,
Go ahead.
Yeah, when we started, the data engineering team was a one-man show, and the person who was there in the About Us slide, Rajkumar. So he built all the data pipelines that brought in data from different sources onto the warehouse. So his job was to talk with each of the teams to understand the business logic that is being applied to the systems, how the CRM works, or how the marketing tool works, or how the supporting system works. For him to understand the logic and to build the data pipeline, he needed to have proper domain expertise to have that in place, so that he was able to, so that he will be able to build the data pipelines correctly. And as we started growing, at least from a data engineering perspective, there were 3 to 4 people who started gaining experience across different domains, so that even if 1 or 2 of them were on leave, the others were able to pick up where the others have left off. And from a BA perspective and an analytics perspective, we have people specializing on each domain. We have Ashik and Mahesh, they have their own responsibilities. They look at each different teams. Ashik supports product and support organizations, and Mahesh supports revenue and finance organizations. So it is they do need to have proper domain expertise to have to support the organization, so that they're able to build reports and data assets that make sense and are consumable.
To add a little bit to that, the operations champion, right? The data champion who's typically part of the operations team, and somebody on the data analytics team, they would tag team, because you have one person here who actually works on a lot of the product related data assets. And then you have that corresponding product Atlan data champion. And then these 2 people actually work very closely together. So over time, they both get a little bit of each other's context. And we've seen it evolve over time, but typically we rely on the operations person to bring in their context, and we bring in the data context and we build it together.
Gotcha. So if I could repeat it, there is alignment with the various functions, but it's not necessarily that one person is becoming the domain, one data person is becoming the subject matter expert, the domain expert. It's just a partnership.
Correct. Yeah. And we've also used Slack to kind of create an ops central, which is just where we keep sharing context, simply because it's good to know what's happening in other teams, especially as some metric is changing, something else is changing, how we look at something is changing. Just making sure that context is visible across all operations teams has also proved helpful to us.
So I think maybe a couple more questions here. One, We talked a lot about data. There's a question here about certifying dashboards. Do you certify dashboards, or is it more about the underlying data, or is there a combination of both? Like, Lloyd, you mentioned there's kind of the QA process that you go through. How does that look like from a data and then all the way out to dashboard kind of perspective?
Okay, so dashboards that are built by our team are usually validated with partnering with the operations team member who requested the dashboard. So they pull in data from that source system and they verify it against the dashboard. And only after they give a sign off, we mark the dashboard as validated by ops and we publish it to production. This is for dashboards that are being developed by our team. And when we follow a slightly decentralized approach where we have creator licenses distributed to other team members as well. So they do not have published access to the production environment, and they can publish their dashboards only to their sandbox, after which it is up to us to validate the data and all the metric calculations. And we even give them guidelines on how the look and feel should be, where the filter should go, and what are the elements that are basic expectations from a dashboard, and what are the different colors that the color palette that has been chosen for the dashboard. So we verify all these aspects, and only when we are happy, we publish this to production. That is how we currently have a quality process for dashboards.
Do you have any kind of timeline for that? Is there a goal to, as they come in, I don't know if there's any kind of SLA, or is it kind of a work in progress? Each one's different. How does that look?
Yeah, it depends on the nature of the request. Some dashboards can be completed within a couple of days, or some take a couple of weeks because the data has to be prepared and transformed for consumption. So it depends on a lot of factors, but we are upfront to the ETA and the SLAs with our stakeholders so that they know when to expect and when to be ready to validate the data.
Awesome. Well, I will ask one last, maybe the easiest, maybe the hardest question, which is parting advice or words of wisdom, right? Someone that's in the middle of the journey, just starting the self-service journey. I mean, what were some of the biggest takeaways that you've had in your experience so far? And what are you looking forward to, right? 2023, just kicking off really. What's next for the Chargebee team?
I think one thing, irrespective of where we're starting off, each of you in the data journey, right? Be very clear about what your next step is. I think that's all you need to know, right? Like if you need to be clear about the metadata in order to progress further, just make sure you're super clear about the next step, and then you can build from there. That's been our learning. Because without that, if we go to a tool, the tool cannot help us unless we have clarified what our next step structurally needs to be. So that is what I would say. 2023, I think a lot more enablement and truly becoming more self-service. Because while we enable a lot, I think there's a lot of things that we also do in the background, enable people, answer questions. I think with a lot more people using Atlan, truly searching for and building what they want is something we're starting to see now. So we hope to see more of that and hope to enable more of that in 2023. Lloyd, anything from you?
Yeah. What I felt was a key to our success was knowing where we stood, and we were able to measure the problems that we faced, and we knew exactly what we wanted from Atlan, and we followed a measured and structured approach to the implementation, rollout, and onboarding of users. We had a plan in place for onboarding each user, when that particular demo was supposed to happen, what were the data sets the particular user was to be given access to. So all of this followed a very structured plan, and because of that, we were able to implement it and have a smooth rollout for Atlan.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the time and all the thoughtful answers, and really just focusing on the journey that the Chargebee's been on. It's been great to work with you from an Atlan perspective. And I'm sure that the group here benefited a lot just hearing your experiences with self-service analytics. So thank you again, and thank you to everyone who was able to attend today. If you don't already subscribe to our Metadata Weekly Substack or Humans of Data blog, please do that. And of course, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about Atlan. Happy to answer them and get on a call and talk more. Lavanya, Lloyd, one last thank you, and thanks to everyone here. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Austin. It's been a pleasure